So the first one that we'll cover today is about conflict management leading to greater organizational effectiveness. And so the question of this study was around what does our recent literature and recent research tell us about using conflict management as an instrument for organizational effectiveness. And so to study this, they looked through 22 past studies and other resources to create a literature review. And the topics included were conflict, organizational conflict, conflict management, and organizational effectiveness. And then what came from this was a number of suggestions that the authors made. One of the suggestions was that there are many different definitions and types of classifying conflict in the workplace. It's helpful for organizations to know that conflict is an inherent part of human interaction, and so therefore an inherent element of an organization. And they also suggested you could classify conflict as dysfunctional and functional, and then work with it using those kind of labels. And they defined functional conflict as also known as cognitive conflict, as manifesting among employees who disagree over aspects related to the completion of a task. And to some degree, functional conflict can be useful. It can be helpful for creativity and useful for employee motivation. But if it's not managed, it can become dysfunctional. And dysfunctional conflict is often seen in a lot of personal and relational disputes where differences between employees lead to avoiding and counterproductive behaviors, which obviously do not help organizational effectiveness. So in order to optimize organizational effectiveness, the authors suggest that conflict should be managed so that both leadership and employees are able to work together to accomplish organizational goals. And they suggest that organizations can begin to build a cooperative culture through first making sure leadership is trained on how to effectively manage conflict, which is kind of where our position comes in. And that leaders shouldn't be taught a one-size-fits-all approach to managing workplace conflict, but rather an approach that looks at the needs of the individuals in conflict and helps address those through company procedures or through their interpersonal interaction. And so a key takeaway from this is that training organizational leadership on conflict management directly helps employees and the organization. And so greater organizational effectiveness is just one of the many benefits that effective conflict management can bring to an organization. So this study this literature review is pretty straightforward, kind of confirmed, I think, a lot of things that at least I knew about conflict management. And but I'm interested to hear if you all have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, no, I think it's pretty straightforward, kind of validating the work that we do. One thing that I think this touches on is the need, the concept of, not a one size fits all approach. So teaching leaders that's why I think like certain assessments and tools of like the Thomas Kilmann, right, for like finding conflict styles, when we do things like that, when we introduce this to a team or like have them take the assessment, making sure that we are acknowledging that there are different ways, there are different times you might use a different style, and that's a constructive and appropriate sort of response is like figuring out the different ways. So that just like came to me when you were talking. I was thinking, we have to be sure when we do assessments and we talk about conflict styles with our clients, making sure that we acknowledge that there is no one size fits all. None of us are really always one way, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's true. So with regards to training organizations on conflict management, I have several thoughts. One is, if we train them on it, then do they still need us? And then the other is, even with the trainings, if they don't have someone that is really constantly working at it and growing in that area, are they really, able to do the work? And I'm of the mind that, and this is just because I've heard it from employees, is that a lot of times they're reluctant to allow an HR person or someone else really work with things. There's confidentiality concerns. Um, there's also the concern that, yeah, if we go talk to them, if we take this to them, it's going to be on our record. Um, and then there's also that, well, she likes her better, or I mean, and it's hard if you're in an organization not to have, you're going to have natural affinities towards certain people. There's some people you're going to like more than others. And I just am not confident that most HR professionals can actually deal with conflict the way someone from the outside can. Because even though we're professionals, I mean, there's still clients that, we will, feel closer to or feel more aligned with. I just think that we're more aware of it and we work harder to overcome that. So I don't know. I didn't ask a question, did I?
You don't have to ask a question. That was perfect.
But what do y'all
That's
think
why
about that though?
consultancy services, though, Tony, are so vital, right? Is it having a consultant service, a third party coming, and I hear what you're saying on the relationships, right? So it's difficult to talk about when there's either functional or dysfunctional, especially when there's dysfunctional conflict occurring. It's difficult for a leader or an HR professional, someone that already has relationships built with everyone. It's a little bit more difficult, but I wouldn't say that it's unmanageable or that it's not possible, right? I mean, I think that's where our work plays such a vital role, is equipping like the leaders to be able to manage this, right? And that's why there are like third party practitioners such as us.
Yeah,
I agree. I still feel like though with those task oriented conflicts, it's better. It's easier for them than with perhaps the more relational or and dysfunctional conflicts.
I've also never utilized those words, functional and dysfunctional conflict.
yeah.
I like them.
I don't know that I do. Interesting, because I feel like all conflicts can, if they're managed, can be. They're just saying, Noah, help me understand. They're just saying that if it's not managed, it's dysfunctional. If it's managed, it's functional. Yes.
For the most part, although they have this also in general conflict management research. They have like different, you've probably heard of this, but different types of conflict, like process, relational, and task conflict. And typically they say task conflict can be the most productive, most creative, most beneficial. Relational and process can be a little bit more difficult and more likely to lead to dysfunctional. So I think yes, like all conflict can become dysfunctional, but I think there's also maybe a little bit more tendencies of those relational conflicts because maybe there's more emotional investment or lack of trust or whatever contributing to that. Yeah, but I actually haven't heard of these either. But I found them interesting. It's one way of I mean it just poses the question: can all conflicts become functional even if they're dysfunctional, or are there some conflicts that are like intractable conflicts and stuff like that can those do those have any sort of revivability in terms of making some sort of benefit to
I like to, maybe that's just the
optimist
optimist in me. I like to see that even in those intractable conflicts, there's still like growth and opportunities, even if it's just for the individual, not necessarily for the relationship, right?
Yep. I agree. And see, I don't see dysfunctional conflict as a permanent thing. I think it can absolutely just be a state that it's in at that time.